The voicemail lasted 14 seconds. Dad, it's Derek. Listen, I need you out of the lake house by Friday. We sold it. Closing is already done. I know this is fast, but the timing was critical. There's a room reserved for you at the extended stay on Route 9. We'll talk soon. Okay. Bye. Soon. That word sat in my chest like a stone someone had dropped from a great height. I played it a second time, standing at the kitchen counter, still holding the mug of coffee I'd poured 30 seconds before my phone lit up. October morning light was coming through the pine trees the way it always did this time of year, cutting gold across the oak floors. Eleanor had refinished herself the summer before the diagnosis. I looked at those floors. I looked at the steam rising off the mug. I set it down very carefully, as if sudden movements might break something that hadn't already broken. My son had sold my home, but what he didn't know was that the moment he made that call, he had made the most expensive mistake of his life. And I was going to let him find that out all on his own. Before I tell you how I turned what he thought was a victory into the worst day of his life, I need you to understand something about Derek. He was never cruel by nature. He was something more dangerous. He was weak. A weak man with an ambitious wife and a lifestyle that outran every paycheck he had ever cashed. I had watched it build for a decade the leased SUV he couldn't afford. The private school tuition charged to a card that was perpetually close to its limit. The lake house parties for people he was trying to impress, who would never truly respect him. I filled the gaps quietly the way fathers do. I told myself he would find solid ground. He never found it. He found Cassandra instead. And Cassandra had enough ambition for the two of them, and a gift for convincing Derek that every shortcut was just smart thinking. My name is Walter Simmons. I am 68 years old. For 31 years I worked as a civil engineer for one of the largest infrastructure firms in the Midwest. I designed bridges. And the problem? Forthectadeon, literal bridges, steel and cable and concrete spanning the kinds of gaps that used to take a man a week to walk around. I spent my career understanding load-bearing capacity, understanding what happens to a structure when it is asked to hold more weight than it was ever designed for. I should have seen the collapse coming. The lake house had been in my life longer than Derek had. Eleanor and I bought the land in 1986. 1 year before he was born. 23 acres of shoreline on a glacial lake in northern Wisconsin that her father had shown us on a Sunday drive and said, if I were 40 years younger, that is where I'd build my life. We built ours there. I poured some of that foundation myself, on weekends, with help from 2 college friends who worked for beer and the promise of fishing rights. Eleanor planted the garden along the south side. We raised Derek in that house every summer for 18 years. After she passed 3 years ago, it was the only place where I still felt her close. I had signed the title over to Derek 14 months before that phone call. It was my estate attorney Gerald's idea, a straightforward gifting strategy to reduce the taxable estate while I was still living. Eleanor was already gone. The house would go to Derek eventually regardless. Why let the government take a percentage when I could hand it over now and keep living there the same way I always had? Derek had cried when I told him. He hugged me in the driveway in front of Eleanor's garden and said, Dad, nothing changes. This will always be your home. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative was understanding that the boy I had raised had become someone I didn't recognize. The movers arrived 2 hours after the voicemail. I didn't call Derek back. I stood at the window and watched a white cargo truck back up the gravel drive while a woman in a blazer walked the property taking photographs on her phone. I recognized the blazer before I recognized the woman. It was from Consolidated Land Partners, a development group out of Minneapolis I had read about in the regional business paper. They had been buying lakefront properties all across the county, parceling them out for luxury resort construction. They paid fast, and they paid below market, because sellers who needed fast money accepted below market. Derek needed fast money. He always needed fast money. The woman with the phone noticed me watching from the window and gave me a small, professional wave. The kind of wave that says, I see you, and I am also going to proceed with what I came here to do. I did not wave back. I walked to the bedroom. Eleanor's reading chair was still in the corner where it had been for 20 years, positioned at the angle she preferred, so the morning light came over her left shoulder. Her last book was still on the side table. I had never moved. I could not have told you why, exactly, only that moving it felt like an act of erasure I was not prepared to commit. I picked up the book. I tucked it under my arm. Then I opened the closet and pulled out the single duffel bag I kept there for fishing weekends, and I started to pack. Not because I was surrendering. I want you to understand that clearly. I packed because I needed to leave that room before the movers came in and handled her things with the same detached efficiency they applied to furniture. I drove myself to the extended stay on Route 9. I did not call my son. I did not call a lawyer. I called one person. Harlan, I said when he answered. It's Walter. I need you to pull the Simmons file. The one from 2019. The secondary filing. A pause. The sound of a chair adjusting. Walter? Which secondary filing? We did 3 instruments that year. The one we almost didn't do, I said. The one you called belt and suspenders. Another pause, longer this time. Walter. Is something wrong? Pull the file, Harlan, I said. Then meet me at the diner on County Road F. I'll explain everything. Harlan Cross had been my attorney for 19 years. He was 64, retired from active practice. Except for existing clients, he refused to abandon out of what he called professional loyalty and what I suspected was mild stubbornness. He was the one who had structured Eleanor's estate. He was the one who had drafted the gifting instrument that transferred the lake house to Derek. And he was the one who, on a Thursday afternoon in April of 2019, had sat across from me in his office and said, Walter, I know you trust the boy, but let me add one more layer. Just in case. Think of it as engineering. I had laughed at that. An attorney who spoke my language. Belt and suspenders, he had called it. The suspenders were about to catch my son's entire plan before it hit the floor. I arrived at the diner first. I ordered coffee I didn't intend to drink and sat in the back booth where the light was bad and no one would recognize me. The extended stay had smelled of carpet cleaner and recycled air. The room was a 12 by 14 box with a laminate desk and a window that faced a drainage ditch. I had sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after setting down the duffel bag, holding Eleanor's book, thinking about the specific kind of quiet that settles into a life when the people who made it worth living are gone, and then the places follow. I let myself feel that for exactly 20 minutes. Then, I picked up the phone and started working. Harlan arrived, carrying a accordion folder that looked older than both of us. He slid into the booth across from me, ordered nothing, and opened the folder immediately. His reading glasses were already on. He found the document he was looking for on the third try and spread it flat on the table between us. The secondary easement and riparian rights assignment, he said, tapping the top of the page. Filed with the county recorder, April 22nd, 2019. You remember why we did this? I remembered exactly why. When I transferred the surface title of the property to Derek, Harlan had suggested, insisted, actually, that we create a separate instrument. In Wisconsin, water rights attached to lakefront property can be held independently from the surface title under certain conditions. The riparian rights to the lake access, the dock, the boathouse, and critically, the 180-foot shoreline frontage, we transferred those not to Derek, but to a single-purpose LLC we created that same afternoon. Simmons Heritage Holdings, LLC. Sole member, Walter R. Simmons. Derek received the deed to 23 acres of land and a 4-bedroom house. What he did not receive, what his deed did not convey, and what any competent title search should have flagged was the legal right to access, develop, or transfer the water. On a lakefront resort property, those rights were not an amenity. They were the entire asset. Without riparian access, Consolidated Land Partners had not purchased a resort site. They had purchased a landlocked cabin in the woods. Does Derek know about the LLC? Harlan asked. No, I said. He was visiting Cassandra's parents the day we filed. He signed the gifting document separately, a month earlier. By the time we added the riparian assignment, he had already stopped reading the mail I sent about the estate plan. He thought everything was settled. Harlan leaned back in his seat and folded his hands on the table. He had the expression of a man who had seen a great deal of human nature over a long career and had learned to be neither surprised nor judgmental, only precise. "Walter," he said carefully, "do you understand what this means for the sale?" "Tell me in plain terms," I said. "The way you'd explain it to a jury." He nodded. Derek conveyed the surface title to Consolidated. That conveyance is valid, as far as it goes. But the deed he signed says nothing about the water rights, because the water rights were never his to convey. He does not hold them. He never held them. Simmons Heritage Holdings holds them, and Simmons Heritage Holdings has never agreed to anything. He paused. Consolidated just paid a significant sum of money for a lakefront property with no lake access. Legally, they bought a view. How much do you think they paid? Harlan looked at the county assessor printout he'd brought in the folder. He ran a quick calculation in his head. Market rate for that shoreline, for resort development purposes, probably somewhere between 4 and 5 million, if they paid Derek anything close to fair value. They paid 3.2, I said. I had found the recorded deed on my phone in the parking lot of the extended stay. He sold it fast. He needed the money. Fast. Harlan was quiet. So he accepted a discount. He accepted a discount, I confirmed. And he spent it before the ink was dry. That part I knew because my daughter-in-law had posted about it. Cassandra maintained an active presence on social media. The kind of curated performance where every purchase is a lifestyle statement. And every dinner is a declaration of arrival. Within hours of the closing, her accounts lit up with champagne photographs and a caption about new beginnings and finally living the life we deserve. The comment section was full of friends who had no idea they were celebrating money that did not belong to her. I sat in the parking lot of the diner looking at those photographs for a long time. There was one in particular. Derek was smiling, his arm around Cassandra's shoulders, and they were toasting over a restaurant table that I recognized. It was the Harbormore, the nicest restaurant in the county. The same place where I had taken Eleanor for our anniversary every year since 1991. The same restaurant where Derek, at age 9, had spilled a full glass of cranberry juice on a tablecloth and cried until Eleanor made the waiter laugh by calling it abstract art. He was toasting in that restaurant. He was toasting the sale of the home his mother had loved. The specific feeling that moved through me in that parking lot is hard to name. It was not anger, though anger was part of it. It was something older and colder. The feeling I used to get in the middle of a contract dispute when the other party showed me they had not done their homework, and I had. It was the feeling of a man who knows exactly what cards are in his hand and is waiting, without urgency, for the right moment to lay them down. I called Harlan back into the diner. "Here is what I need," I said. "I need to know exactly what Consolidated's financing looks like. Their development loan will have conditions. There will be a timeline for clearing title." He made a call from the table to a colleague who handled commercial real estate transactions. The answer came back within the hour. Consolidated Land Partners was operating under a construction financing commitment from a regional bank. The commitment letter required clear and marketable title to all property, including appurtenant rights within 72 hours of closing. Or the commitment could be withdrawn at the bank's discretion. The closing had happened that morning. I had 72 hours. I did not need 72 hours, but I wanted Derek to spend some of that money first. I wanted it to feel real to him before I made it disappear. I went back to the extended stay and I did not sleep. I sat at the laminate desk with Eleanor's book open in front of me, and I drafted a timeline on a legal pad Harlan had left behind. I thought about my son, not with hatred, but with the particular sorrow of a man who built a bridge and watched it choose to fall. I thought about the conversations I had never had with him about money, about character, about the difference between things you earn and things you are handed. I had protected him from consequences his entire life. I had paid the overdraft fees and the bounced check penalties and the credit card balances quietly, without lectures, because I thought that was what love looked like. I had been wrong. I had loved him the way a bad engineer loves a flawed design, by hiding the cracks instead of reinforcing the structure. He had never learned what things cost. He was about to learn what a lie cost. By the second morning, Cassandra's social media showed them at a hotel in Chicago. Derek had texted me once a single line that said, "Hope you're getting settled. Let me know if you need anything," which told me exactly how clearly he had reasoned through the permanence of what he had done. He thought it was over. He thought the geography of the situation, him in a hotel in Chicago, me in a room on Route 9, was a clean separation. He had filed me underhandled. He had not considered that I had spent my entire career solving problems other people thought were permanent. I called Harlan at 7 in the morning on day 2. "It's time," I said. We drove together to the county recorder's office when it opened at 8. Harlan had already prepared the formal notice, a certified document on Simmons Heritage Holdings letterhead, asserting the LLC's riparian rights and providing official notice to all parties that the recent conveyance of the surface property did not include and could not include the water rights and lake access, which remained exclusively with the LLC and had not been released, transferred, or encumbered. We filed the notice. We had it time-stamped. We sent certified copies by overnight courier to Consolidated Land Partners' registered office, their construction lender, and their title insurance company. Then Harlan made one more call. Not to Derek, to the county sheriff's civil division, who had an existing professional relationship with Harlan, and who was willing to have a deputy present the following morning at the lake house property in a supporting capacity for what Harlan described as a civil title matter that might become contentious. We drove to the lake house the next morning at 7:45. I had not been back since the movers came. I was not prepared for what the property looked like now. Consolidated moved fast. That was their business model. They had already brought in a survey crew and a small excavator to test the soil near the shoreline. There were orange flags in the ground along the dock line. There were folding tables set up in the driveway with site plans on them, weighted down against the October wind with coffee thermoses. Derek was there. I had not expected that. I had thought he would be in Chicago still, or already abroad, insulated by distance and his own certainty that the problem was solved. But he was standing near the survey tables in a jacket that was too thin for the weather, talking to a man in a hard hat who I recognized from Consolidated's website as their regional project director. His name was Burke. He was not a patient man. I would learn that quickly. Derek saw me walking down the driveway. For a fraction of a second, something crossed his face that I had not seen there in years. It was fast, and he buried it faster, pulling up the familiar architecture of his adult persona, the confidence, the slightly impatient smile. But I had seen it. I had seen the boy underneath the man, and the boy knew exactly what he had done. "Dad," he said, moving toward me with his hands coming up in a gesture that was half greeting and half traffic direction. "What are you doing here? This is an active site now. You can't just walk onto a construction." "Good morning, Derek," I said. My tone stopped him. It was the same tone I used 30 years ago in conference rooms when I needed a room to go quiet. Derek had heard it exactly once before in his adult life, when he had forged my signature on a loan application at 22, and I had found out. He had never forgotten what came after that tone. He went still. Burke, the project director, had noticed us. He walked over with the expression of a man who managed timelines for a living and did not appreciate variables. "Mr. Simmons," he said, extending a hand to me. He meant Derek. Then he looked between us, recalculating. "Which Mr. Simmons?" "Walter," I said, shaking his hand. "The previous owner." "He's the seller's father," Derek said quickly. "He used to live here. I apologize. He doesn't have authorization to be on site. I'll handle this." "You misunderstand why I'm here," I said. I looked past Derek to Burke. "I'm here because there is a title defect in this transaction that your legal team needs to be made aware of immediately." Harlan stepped forward and offered Burke a manila envelope. Burke took it the way people take envelopes they don't want, with both hands and a downward look. "What is this?" Derek said. His voice had risen slightly. That is a certified copy of a riparian rights assignment filed with the county recorder in 2019, I said. It documents that the water access rights, the dock rights, and the full 180-foot shoreline frontage on this property are held by Simmons Heritage Holdings LLC, a single-member LLC of which I am the sole member. Derek stared at me. What? The rights were never conveyed to you, I said. Your deed covers the surface property. It does not convey the water. It never could, because I held the water rights in a separate instrument. Your title attorney should have found it in a complete search. They apparently did not look carefully enough. I paused. Or your timeline didn't allow for careful. Burke had opened the envelope. He was reading. This, Derek started. Dad, this isn't you, this doesn't change anything. The sale is done. The money cleared. The money cleared, I agreed. That part is correct. Burke looked up from the document. His voice when he spoke was quiet and controlled in the way that very expensive lawyers train people to be quiet and controlled when the situation is actively catastrophic. Mr. Simmons, he said, and this time he meant me. Are you asserting that the riparian rights to the lake access were not included in the conveyance from Derek Simmons to Consolidated Land Partners? That is correct, I said. They were not included. They could not have been included. And I have the recorded instrument and the chain of title to document that definitively. And are you willing to convey those rights? I took my time before answering. That depends on a number of things. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a construction site where no one is speaking, and the excavator has gone idle, and the October wind is coming off a lake that no one present, it turns out, legally controls. Burke excused himself to make a call. He walked 30 yards down the driveway and stood with his back to us, his voice too low to hear. Derek took the opportunity to close the distance between us. He was not calm anymore. The confidence was gone. What was underneath it was something I recognized less easily. Something panicked and cornered. Dad, he said. What did you do? I protected myself, I said. The way I should have done for Eleanor when she trusted people who didn't deserve it. The way I should have done for myself when I signed over that title. This is insane. You can't the riparian thing. That's a technicality. We can work around it. I'll call my title company. They have insurance for fraud? I said. He stopped. Derek. I kept my voice level. You accepted money from a development company for a lakefront resort property. You represented to them that you had marketable title to the full property, including the water access. You did not have that title. You knew you didn't fully understand what you had been given, and instead of asking me, instead of having a competent attorney do a complete review, you rushed this through in 72 hours because you needed the money immediately. That is called misrepresentation. In a transaction of this size, it may be called fraud. I didn't know about the LLC, he said. His voice had dropped to something I barely recognized. It was the voice of the 22-year-old who had forged my signature. Dad, I genuinely didn't know. I believe you, I said. He exhaled. It doesn't matter, I finished. He looked at me the way he had not looked at me since he was a child, without the performance of the adult he had decided to be. He looked at me like a person who was frightened. What are you going to do? Burke was walking back. Behind him, on the county road, a sheriff's department vehicle had pulled into the far end of the driveway and was parked with its engine running. I had asked Harlan to have the deputy arrive at 8:30. It was 8:32. I'm going to let the situation resolve itself, I said. That's all I've done, Derek. I set up a legal structure years ago, and I let your choices run into it. I didn't plan this the day you called me. You built this. You built all of it. Burke reached us. He did not look at Derek. He looked at me. Our counsel has reviewed the filing. They agree, it appears valid. Our financing commitment requires clear title to appurtenant rights. If the riparian rights are not conveyed, we cannot complete the construction loan draw. We will need to either obtain a rights transfer or void the purchase. Void? Derek said. Void, Burke repeated. which would require full return of the purchase price. Derek made a sound that was not quite a word. The "I can't, Cassandra, already we paid off." "That's not my concern," Burke said flatly. "That's a matter between you and your creditors." He looked at me. "Mr. Simmons, I'm asking you directly. Are you willing to transfer the riparian rights to Consolidated at a fair market price?" I looked at the lake. The morning light was doing the same thing to the water that it had done every October morning for the 37 years I had sat beside it. The same quality of light. The same cold beauty. Eleanor had called it the silver hour. "I'm willing to discuss it," I said, "but not today, and not under these conditions." Burke nodded, accepting that. He turned to Derek. "We'll be in touch through counsel. In the meantime, our survey operations are suspended pending title resolution." He made a gesture to the crew, and the excavator, which had been idling, went silent. The deputy had gotten out of the vehicle. He walked down the driveway at a measured pace and introduced himself to Harlan. I had not asked for Derek to be arrested. I want to be clear about that. What Harlan had explained to the civil division was the situation, and they had advised that if the other party was present and the matter involved potential fraud, it was appropriate to have a representative available. The deputy was not there to take anyone into custody. He was there so that Derek could not pretend, afterward, that he had not been formally informed. The deputy delivered the notice personally, a formal assertion of the LLC's rights, a courtesy copy of the filing, and a notice that any further conveyance, encumbrance, or development of the water-adjacent portions of the property would constitute interference with a recorded property interest. Derek stood in the driveway of the house where he had learned to swim, holding the papers with both hands, and for a long time he did not speak. Cassandra arrived 40 minutes later, having driven up from Chicago when Derek's calls became incoherent. She got out of the car, looking the way she always looked, put together, arranged, ready to manage something, but when she understood what was actually happening, when Burke explained it to her, in the plain language of someone who had stopped being diplomatic, something behind her eyes went very still. "How much do we owe them?" she asked Derek quietly. "Everything," he said, "or close to it." She looked at me then. She had never liked me. I had always understood that. And I had never taken it personally, because I understood that what she disliked was not me specifically, but what I represented. And that, a standard of conduct that exposed the gap between what they claimed to be and what they were. "Walter," she said, "you can fix this. Just transfer the water rights. Let the sale stand. We'll give you a portion. We'll make it right." "A portion," I repeated. "Whatever's fair." I thought about the voicemail. 14 seconds. No apology. No hesitation. The flat administrative voice of someone disposing of a problem. I thought about Eleanor's reading chair and the book on the side table that I had carried out in a duffel bag to an extended stay with a window facing a drainage ditch. "Cassandra," I said, "you did not call me when you were making this decision. You did not call me to discuss it, or to warn me, or to ask whether there was anything about this property I might want to address before you sold it. You did not ask me about the title. Rather, you did not have your attorney call my attorney. You gave me 14 seconds on a voicemail and a motel reservation." She opened her mouth. "I am not angry," I said, which was mostly true. "If you had come to me honestly, I would have helped you. I have helped you every time you have allowed me to. But you didn't come to me. You filed me under solved, and you went to Chicago for champagne." The word champagne landed. Cassandra's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Your choices are in front of you," I said. "Burke's legal team will be in contact. The title issue will resolve the way title issues resolve. I'm going to go home." Derek looked at me. "Home? Dad, you can't where?" "Harlan drew up a license agreement this morning," I said. "I have the legal right to occupy the property through the LLC's interest in the water access. It's a narrow basis, but it's sufficient for interim occupancy pending resolution of the title dispute. I'll be back in my house tonight." I looked at Derek for a moment, and what I felt was not triumph. It was closer to grief. The guest room is available if you need somewhere to stay while this gets sorted out. Both of you. I turned and walked back to Harlan's car. Neither of them followed. The legal resolution took 4 months. Consolidated's title insurance company conducted a full investigation. Harlan and Burke's attorneys negotiated through the winter. In the end, Consolidated agreed to restructure the transaction. The surface property was conveyed back to Derek. The riparian rights were sold from the LLC directly to Consolidated at a price that reflected their actual value. And the proceeds of that separate conveyance came to me. It was enough to fund a very comfortable number of remaining years. Derek was required by Consolidated's counsel to repay the original purchase price, which he and Cassandra were able to do only because Cassandra's parents agreed to loan them the funds. A conversation, I was told, was the most uncomfortable of their marriage. Derek was not prosecuted. The title insurance company determined the misrepresentation was negligent rather than intentional, which was the correct finding. He had not known about the LLC because he had never asked. His punishment was financial and relational, not criminal. And I told Harlan from the beginning that I thought that was appropriate. I am not a hard man. I have designed enough infrastructure to know that you do not demolish a bridge just because it has failed once. Sometimes you reinforce it and put weight back on it slowly and see what it can carry. Derek called me in February. He did not apologize in the way people apologize in movies. With a speech prepared and a clear moral reckoning, he said, "Dad, I'm sorry about the voicemail. That wasn't right." I told him. I appreciated that. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular, about the weather and a football game, and when we hung up, I sat in Eleanor's reading chair for a long time, with the window showing me the Silver Lake going dark at the end of an afternoon. I had been a civil engineer for 31 years. My job was never to prevent all failures. My job was to ensure that when something came apart, it did not take everything else down with it. That the structure, however damaged, could be assessed and rebuilt. I still believe that about bridges. I still believe it about families. But I will tell you this, and I want you to hear it clearly, because I mean every word. I spent 40 years giving to the people I loved, without conditions, without documentation, without ever considering that a generous hand and a closed eye are not the same thing as trust. Trust is something you verify. Love is not naivety. The most important thing I have learned at 68 years old, after 3 decades of designing load-bearing structures, is that the strongest materials are the ones that have been tested. If you've ever been made to feel like a problem someone needed to solve instead of a person someone chose to love, leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If you believe that a man's dignity is not something his children get to take away from him, hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Saga. Because the stories I tell are true, and the people in them are real, and they are proof that the quiet ones are always worth watching.